The order arrived as music, and the music was already inside her skull. Captain Nadia Cole stood on the bridge of the Iron Antiphon and felt the war hymn crawl through the hull plating, through her boots, through the small bones of her ears. It came down from the choir's flagship in a single sustained chord, low and golden, and impossibly patient, and it carried a meaning that needed no translation. Kneel, kneel by dawn. The deadline was not spoken in words. It was felt as a pressure behind the eyes, a countdown measured in the slow brightening of the colony world below. The world was called Halloran's Reach, and 4 million human beings lived on it. By the ship's clock, dawn over the capital was 19 hours away. "Conductor's signal holding steady," said Lieutenant Daniel Park from the sensor station. His voice was flat, careful, the voice of a man keeping himself in one piece. "Same chord they have used on every world they have taken. 603 planets in 10,000 years, Captain. 603, and not one of them fired a shot back." "They will hear about the 604th, Cole said. She did not raise her voice. She had learned, over 11 years of command, that the people around her took their fear from her hands and her shoulders, not her words, and so she kept her hands open on the rail and her shoulders down. Below her, on the tactical plot, the choir's armada hung in a great curved wall above Halloran's Reach. 240 ships. She had counted them herself when they came out of the dark, each one a long, pale shape like a struck tuning fork, each one humming on the same note as the flagship at the center. 240 ships, and one of hers. The Iron Antiphon was the only human warship in the system. She was not beautiful. She was a long, blunt wedge of gunmetal and scarred ceramic, her hull deliberately ugly, studded with baffles and dead sound paneling that gave her the look of a thing wrapped in scabs. She had been built in a shipyard around Neptune by people who had studied the choir for 40 years and had come to one terrible conclusion. You could not outshoot the choir. You could not outbuild them. You could only stop hearing them. So they had built a ship that could not hear. Every other vessel humanity had ever sent against the choir had died the same way. Not in fire, in silence. The hymn had reached across the void and found the crews, and unmade their will, one mind at a time, until the gun crews set down their tools, and the helmsmen folded their hands, and the ships drifted into the enemy's nets like sleeping children. The recordings were short. They always ended with someone humming along. 11 human ships had gone out against the choir over 40 years, carrying 11 crews and 40 years of hope, and 11 had been lost. The last, the cruiser Antares, had sent back 41 seconds of audio before it went quiet, and in those 41 seconds, you could hear the captain giving fire orders, and then you could hear the captain stop, and then you could hear the captain begin, very softly, to sing. The Iron Antiphon had been built deaf to that. Her hull was a cancellation field given armor. Inside her, the hymn was a rumor. The crew of 112 heard it the way you hear a neighbor's argument through a thick wall, a noise without teeth. It had taken 19 years, and the wealth of 3 colonies to build one hull that the song could not enter. There would not be a second. She was the first ship in history the choir could not touch, and very possibly, the last that humanity would ever afford. But deaf was not the same as armed. Deaf only meant you survived to watch. Captain. Commander Iris Vance, her executive officer, crossed the bridge with a tablet held against her chest like a shield. Vance was the quietest officer Cole had ever served with, and the steadiest. "Colony governor is on the line. 3rd time in an hour. Put her through to my ear only." The governor's voice came in thin and shaking. She was an old woman named Della Ortiz, who had governed Halloran's Reach for 30 years, and had never once raised her voice in council, and now she was begging. "Captain Cole, you have to tell me what to do. People are walking out of their homes. They are walking toward the spaceport. Hundreds of them, then thousands. They are kneeling in the streets. They say the singing told them to. My own deputy is on his knees in my office right now, and he is smiling. I asked him to stand up and he looked at me like I had asked him to stop breathing." Cole closed her eyes. The hymn pressed against the inside of her skull like a warm hand, and she understood, distantly, the shape of the comfort it offered. Stop fighting. Stop being afraid. Belong to something larger and let it carry you. It was the oldest lie in the galaxy, and it was being sung in perfect pitch by something that had perfected it across 100 centuries. Governor, listen to me. The choir cannot make you do anything you would not do if you were tired enough and frightened enough. It only takes the fear that is already in you and turns it into a key. Tell your people that. Tell them the song is not a god. It is a weapon, and a weapon can be answered. With what? Ortiz whispered. You have one ship. I counted them too, Captain. 240. I am 81 years old, and I have buried 2 husbands and a daughter, and I have never in my life been as frightened as I am right now, and you have one ship. I have the right ship, Cole said, and cut the line before her own doubt could climb into her voice. She turned to her bridge. 11 faces, lit blue by the plot, all of them watching her. Outside the viewport, the armada glowed faintly against the curve of the planet, 240 fingers pressed to 240 strings. For a moment, no one spoke. On the plot, a single repeater ship at the edge of the armada adjusted its position by a few hundred meters, and the small movement rippled through the formation, the whole instrument breathing as one. It was beautiful, in the way a closing trap is beautiful. The elegance of a thing that has done its work many times, and knows exactly how. 18 hours, 40 minutes to dawn, Park said, because someone had to say it. Captain, the colony has fewer than that. The kneeling started in the capital, and it is spreading along the coast. The medical net says people who knelt 8 hours ago are not eating, not drinking. They are just listening. If we wait for some better moment, there may not be 4 million people left to save by the time it comes. There may be 4 million people in a posture, and nothing inside them. Then we do not wait. Cole's voice did not change. Status on the colony's defenses, she said, though she already knew. There are none, Captain, Vance answered. Halloran's Reach has 6 orbital weapon platforms. 4 of them have already gone silent. The crews stopped answering 40 minutes ago. The last 2 are firing on nothing, just discharging into empty space, because the gunners are dreaming, with their hands on the triggers. The colony cannot defend itself. It cannot even surrender in an organized way. It can only kneel. Then it will not kneel, Cole said, because we are going to give it something else to do. She looked at the plot a long moment, then made the decision that would either end the war or lose it forever. Commander Vance, wake Dr. Aldous. Tell him it is time to find out if his ghost can sing. Vance did not move at once. Captain, the inversion array has never been tested at full power. The last trial nearly took the ship apart. He told you himself, the math says it works, and the metal says it might not survive being right. The metal will hold. And if it does not? Cole looked at the planet. Somewhere down there, an 81-year-old woman was watching her deputy kneel and smile, and 4 million people were leaning toward a song that wanted to swallow them. Then we will be the first ship in 10,000 years that made them flinch, she said. Wake the doctor. She did not tell Vance the other thing she had carried since the briefing on Neptune. The iron antiphon had cost so much that there would be no second ship. The cancellation hull alone had taken 19 years, and the wealth of 3 colonies, and the colonies had given everything. If this ship failed, there would not be another for a generation, perhaps not ever, because the people who had believed enough to build her would not survive the despair of watching her fall. She was not just the only ship that could stand against the choir. She was the only chance humanity would get to learn whether standing was even possible. Every other species had been given exactly 1 moment to refuse the song, and had missed it, because they had not known it was coming. Humanity had spent 40 years building toward its 1 moment, and the moment was now. Cole found, standing there, that she was not afraid of dying. She was afraid of being remembered as the captain who had the only ship and the 1 chance, and lost it. That was a different fear, a useful one, and she folded it into the iron of her hands and let it make her steadier. Far above them, at the center of the pale armada, in a chamber of resonant glass and slow light, a creature that called itself Herald of the Sixth Silence lifted its long throat and listened to the chord it had been pouring down onto the human world for 6 hours. It was pleased. The humans were a young species, loud and brittle, and they were bending exactly on schedule. The Herald had conducted the fall of 90 worlds in its lifetime, and it had learned to read the moment of surrender the way a gardener reads the moment a fruit gives up and falls. It could feel Halloran's Reach softening. It could feel the small kneeling shapes in the cities, 4 million points of warmth, tilting toward the note like a field of grain, leaning into the wind. But there was one place the song would not stick. One small dark shape in orbit that gave back nothing. The herald had noticed it the way a singer notices a single seat in a vast hall where no face turns up to listen. A flaw, a dead spot in the perfect acoustics of conquest. The herald was 10,000 years old and had never, not once, heard the hymn refused. It found the dead spot more interesting than troubling. In the long memory of the choir, there were perhaps a dozen species the song could not reach, freaks of biology, with minds the cord slid off of. Every one of them had run. The hymn could not bend them, but it filled the space around them, and they fled into the dark, rather than stand in a galaxy that sang a song they could not feel. The herald had hunted such runners across whole star clusters, and taken its time, because a thing that cannot hear the song is a thing that has chosen to be alone, and the herald believed, with the certainty of 10,000 years, that loneliness was its own kind of surrender, slower and more complete than kneeling. The herald had a name for ships like this one, in the old liturgy of the choir, a word that meant, the seat that does not turn. In every great hall there was sometimes one, a single listener, whose face would not lift to the song, and the old conductors had taught that such a listener was not a threat, but a gift, because the whole point of singing was to be heard, and a face that would not turn was a face still worth turning. The herald had turned 10,000 faces. It had never failed. It regarded the small deaf ship now with the calm appetite of a thing that has never once been refused, and cannot conceive of refusal as anything but a delay. It made a sound that, in a human throat, would have been a soft laugh, and it bent the full weight of the cord toward the one ship that would not kneel. Let the small deaf thing watch, it thought. Watching is its own kind of kneeling. It did not yet understand that the deaf can learn to sing. Dr. Emil Aldous arrived on the bridge in a coat that had not been pressed in a week, carrying a steel canister the size of a human heart. He was the oldest person aboard, 71, a sound engineer who had spent the last 40 years of his life listening to recordings no one else could survive. He had built the inversion array with his own hands. He called it the Mockingbird. "You felt it," he said to Cole. "It was not a question. The cord just shifted. It is reaching for us now. Can it touch us?" "No more than before. The hull holds it off." He set the canister on the console and looked at it with something close to tenderness. "But that is the wrong question, Captain. The right question is whether we can touch it back." He explained it again, quickly, for the bridge crew who had not heard. The choir's hymn was not magic. It was a pattern, a precise sequence of frequencies that fitted the architecture of a mind the way a key fits a lock. For 10,000 years, the choir had owned the only key. They sang the lock open, and the species inside simply opened. "But a key works two ways," Aldous said. "It can lock as easily as it can unlock." For 19 years, we have been recording their hymn from inside the only hull that can stand in front of it without falling down. We have the whole song, every note, every breath they take between phrases. We learned it the way a thief learns a lock, and then we learned to play it backward. "Backward," Park repeated. He was a sensor officer, and he thought in patterns. "Doctor, you keep saying the song is a key, but a key only works if the lock is built to take it. Why is every mind in the galaxy built to take their key? Why does the song fit all of us?" It was a good question, and Aldous' answer changed the shape of the room. "Because it was never built to fit a particular mind, Lieutenant. It was built to fit the one thing every mind in the galaxy shares, which is the wish to stop being afraid. There is no species we have ever found that does not, somewhere deep down, want to be carried. Want to belong to something larger than itself. Want permission to put the weight down. That wish is the lock, and it is in every thinking thing that has ever lived. Because a thing that did not feel fear would not have survived long enough to think. The choir did not pick the lock. They found the one lock that was already in everyone, and they spent 10,000 years cutting the perfect key for it." He paused. "Which is why the inversion is so simple, and so dangerous. We are not unmaking their key. We are taking the same wish, the wish to put the weight down, and turning it into the wish to pick the weight back up. We are telling every mind that hears it that the carrying is the point, that the weight is theirs, and they would not trade it for anything. It is the most human thing I have ever built, because that is the bargain humans have made with fear since before we left Earth. We do not put the weight down. We learn to carry it together. Where their hymn says kneel, ours says rise, same key, opposite turn. Vance was not satisfied. She rarely was, which was why Cole had chosen her. Doctor, walk me through the failure cases, all of them. If we are going to take this ship into the middle of 240 hulls on the strength of a weapon tested once, I want to know every way it can go wrong, out loud, in front of the captain, so no one can say later that we did not look. Aldous nodded slowly. He respected the demand. There are 4 ways it fails, Commander. The first is power. If we do not reach charge, the note we send is too weak to turn the lock, and it slides off the conductor like water off glass, and we have given away our position and our intent for nothing. The second is aim. The inversion must strike the source ship, the conductor's own throat, cleanly. If it scatters across the armada, or strikes a repeater first, the repeaters carry a broken, partial note, and a partial note does not unmake anything. It only annoys. The third is timing. The inversion must hold long enough for the source to pass it to the repeaters, 90 seconds at least. If the array fails early, the song reverts to the conductors, and the conductor, now alerted, now angry, finishes what it started, on us first, and the planet second. And the fourth, Vance said. Aldous' face changed. The fourth is us. If, during the broadcast, with the windows open, and their song at full strength inside this hull, even one mind on this bridge breaks and reaches for the array, the lock turns the other way. That is the only failure that does more than lose. That is the failure that arms them. They have never had a deaf hull. They have never had a way past their own weakness, because they have never imagined needing one. If we hand them this ship, intact, with the inversion turned to their purpose, we do not lose Halloran's reach. We lose every world that has not yet fallen. Forever. Because we will have given the choir the one thing 40 years of human work was built to keep from them. We will have taught the deaf to hear, and pointed them at our own children. The bridge was very quiet. Somewhere in the hull, the cord pressed and pressed. Then the fourth case does not happen, Cole said, because we are not going to break. Not one of us. And if I am wrong about that, Commander Vance puts a stop to it before the array can be turned. By any means. And that is an order I am giving now, in front of witnesses, so that it is hers to carry out without hesitation when the moment comes. Is that clear? It is clear, Captain, Vance said, and the weight of it settled on her, and she carried it, because that was the kind of officer she was. And it does what, exactly? To 240 crews? Park asked. If it takes. What does winning look like, down there inside those hulls? Aldous was quiet for a moment. I do not entirely know, he admitted. We have only ever tested it on recordings, and once, briefly, on a captured choir scout. The scout's crew of 9 stopped singing. They sat down. They did not move again for 11 hours. When they did not remember what they had been. They could not say their own names. They had never had names, it turned out. Only a place in the cord, and we had taken the cord away. He met Cole's eyes. It is not a weapon that kills, Captain. It is a weapon that unmakes the thing that lets them conquer. It takes away the song. To a species that has lived inside the song for 10,000 years, that may be the same as killing them. I cannot promise it is kind. Cole thought of that captured scout. She had read the report. There had been a moment, near the end, when one of the 9 had looked at the human interrogator and made a sound the analysts argued over for a year before deciding it was a question, the first question any member of the choir had ever been recorded asking. The sound, translated as best anyone could manage, meant something close to who is singing now. It had broken the interrogator, a hard man with 20 years of service, because there had been no one singing at all. The silence itself had been unbearable to the creature. It had spent its whole life inside a cord, and the absence of the cord was a kind of falling that had no bottom. How long to deploy at full power? Cole asked. The array needs to charge to a level we have never reached. 31 minutes. And there is a cost. Aldous' hands tightened on the canister. The inversion is broadcast through the same hull baffles that keep their song out. To sing back, we have to open the windows. While the array fires, the cancellation field drops to 40%. For as long as we are singing at them, their song will be inside this ship at more than half strength. The crew will hear it, really hear it. Not the rumor through the wall. The full chord, in here, with us. The bridge went very still. How long is the broadcast? Cole asked. If we had to reach all 240 hulls ourselves, 4 minutes. 4 minutes of the full hymn, inside the only ship in the galaxy that was built so its people would never have to hear it. Aldous laughed without any humor in it. We built the ship deaf so the crew would stay human. To win, the crew has to choose to hear the thing that breaks every other crew that ever heard it. We spent 19 years making a wall, and the only way to win is to take the wall down ourselves, on purpose, and stand in the open, while the loudest thing in the galaxy sings directly into us, and hold our own minds together while we do it. Lieutenant Park, Cole said, you have been staring at that spectrum for 10 minutes. Tell me what you see. Park straightened slowly, and there was something new in his face, the first edge of an idea that frightened him with its size. Center of the formation, Captain. Largest hull. It is the only one that does not just carry the chord. It originates it. I can see it on the spectrum. The other 239 are not singing, not really. They are repeating. They take the conductor's note and pass it down the line, hull to hull, amplifying it through those grooves cut along their flanks, until it is strong enough to reach the planet. He looked up. Captain, if the flagship originates it and the others only repeat it, then we do not have to outsing 240 ships. We have to outsing one. If we invert the source, the repeaters cannot tell the difference. They are built to carry whatever the conductor sings. They will carry our song down the line for us. They will do our broadcasting for us. They will sing, Rise to the Whole Armada, in 239 throats, because they cannot tell, it is not the conductor's voice. Aldous turned to him slowly, and his old face was lit with something almost joy and almost terror. That, he said, is correct, and it changes everything. It cuts the broadcast from 4 minutes to perhaps 90 seconds, because we only have to hold the inversion long enough for the source to pass it on. We do not have to reach 240 hulls. We have to reach one throat, cleanly, and let their own machine do the rest. He looked at Cole. But it means we have to reach the flagship. It is at the dead center of the formation. To put the Mockingbird close enough to take the source cleanly, this ship has to fly into the middle of 240 enemy hulls, into the heart of the instrument, and the closer we get, the louder their song, because the source is loudest at the source. By the time we are in range of the conductor, the chord outside this hull will be the loudest sound any human has ever stood inside and lived. Into the middle, Cole said. To the very heart of the choir, Aldous said. We will be flying down the throat of the thing that has eaten 603 worlds, with the windows open, carrying the one weapon that can stop it. Cole descended with him to the Mockingbird's chamber, 3 decks down, in the most heavily baffled compartment of the most heavily baffled ship ever built, because she wanted to see the thing that was going to win or lose the war with her own eyes. The chamber was small and cold and lined with dead sound foam, and at its center stood the array, a column of crystalline resonators wound through with copper, no larger than a man, humming faintly as it drank power from the ship's core. 40 years of one man's life, distilled into a single column of metal and stone. It does not look like much, Cole said. Neither does a tuning fork, Aldous answered, running his hand along the housing the way another man might steady a nervous horse. Neither does the larynx of a singer. The size of the thing that makes a sound has never had anything to do with the size of what the sound can do. A whisper at the right pitch can shatter glass a shout cannot touch. The choir learned that 10,000 years ago and forgot anyone else could learn it too. He looked up at her. I have a confession, and you should hear it before we begin, in case I do not come up from this room. I do not entirely understand why it worked on the Scout. The math says it should, but there is a moment, in the inversion, that I cannot account for. A half-second, where the note we send is neither theirs nor ours, where it is just a question, with no answer yet, and what happens in that half-second is not in my equations. I think, Captain, that what happens in that half-second is the crew. I think the song asks a question, and the crew is the answer, and if the answer is human enough, the inversion takes. That is not science. That is 40 years of listening, and it is all I have, and I am giving it to you so you understand what you are really asking of these people, not their courage, their selves, the whole of who they are, held up against the question, for as long as it takes. Cole was quiet a moment. Then we will be human enough, she said. Come up when you are ready, Doctor. A light flashed on the communications board when she returned to the bridge. Vance read it, and her jaw tightened. Captain, the colony is hailing again, but it is not the governor. It is the civilian net. They have started recording goodbye messages. Families saying farewell to families. They think it is over. Cole listened to 3 seconds of it before she shut it off. A man telling his children to be brave. A woman singing, badly, off-key, a lullaby to a baby, trying to drown out the golden note with her own clumsy human voice, and failing, and trying again anyway. That last one, the off-key lullaby, did something to Cole that the Armada had not managed. It set her jaw, and cleared her head, and burned the last of the fear out of her, like a fever breaking. That woman down there is singing back, she said quietly. She does not have a ship or a weapon or a doctor with 40 years of recordings. She has a baby and a voice that cannot carry a tune, and she is singing back anyway, because that is what we do. We are going to make her right. Mr. Park, log that broadcast. When this is over, I want to know her name. She sang first. She should be remembered as the one who sang first. Cole made her decision, the way she had made every decision that mattered, which was to make it out loud so no one could mistake it for hope. We charge the array, she said. All hands to inversion stations. Dr. Aldous on the Mockingbird. Commander Vance, you have the bridge controls, and you do not surrender them to anyone, including me. If I break, you sing without me. If you break, the senior officer standing sings. The chain does not end until the song is sung, or there is no one left to sing it. Is that understood? Understood, Captain, Vance said. Cole let them see her face fully then, all of it, the fear and the iron together, because they had earned the truth. I want to be honest about what this ship is. The iron antiphon cannot do this twice. The array burns hot enough at full power that the doctor cannot promise the housing survives one firing, let alone 2. The hull will not survive 2 minutes of broadcast with the baffles open. We have one note in us. 1. We are not a fleet, and we are not the first of 100 ships to come. We are the only ship there is, and we are going to spend ourselves entirely, in 90 seconds, on a single note. There will be no reload, no second pass, no falling back to try again tomorrow. When we open the windows, that is the whole war. Everything humanity has, and everything it knows how to do against the choir, spent at once, on one throat, in one breath. So when the moment comes, do not hold anything back for later. There is no later. There is only the note. No one spoke. Then Park said, quietly, Understood, Captain. And one by one the rest of the bridge said it too, and the saying of it was a kind of oath. 11 voices agreeing to spend themselves completely on a single sound. And every one of you is going to hear it, Cole went on. The real song. For 90 seconds, or however long it takes, it is going to tell you to stop. It is going to feel like rest. It is going to feel like the kindest thing anyone has ever offered you. And it is going to be a lie, and you are going to have to choose, with the song already inside you, to keep choosing to be human. I cannot do that for you. No one can do it for anyone. I can only stand here and choose it with you, again and again, for as long as it takes. That is all command is. That is all it has ever been. So when the windows open, you look at the person next to you, and you remember that the choir has never once heard the word no in 10,000 years. Not once. We are going to teach them the word. Stations. They went to stations. The iron antiphon turned her blunt, ugly nose toward the heart of the Armada and began to move. In the chamber of resonant glass, the herald of the sixth silence felt the small deaf ship begin to move, and for the first time in 900 years, it felt something it could not immediately name. The dead spot was coming toward it. This was not in the pattern. In 10,000 years of conquest, the dead spots had always run. The herald had been so certain of this that it had already, in some idle corner of its vast slow mind, begun to plan the hunt. But this dead spot was not running. It was flying straight at the conductor, steady and unhurried, into the center of an armada that could not be passed. The herald studied the small, ugly vessel as it threaded toward the formation. It was wrapped in some dull cancellation material, crude and primitive, the work of a species barely off its own world. It carried weapons, but its weapons were nothing. A single human warship could not scratch the armada. The herald had let dead spots approach before, the way one lets a moth approach a lamp, and it had always ended the same way, the moth circling closer and closer to a light it could not understand until it simply stopped. The herald bent the cord. It thickened the song around the approaching ship, not to break the deaf crew, for that was impossible, but to fill every cubic meter of space they were flying into, so that even deaf, they would feel the pressure of it, the weight of a galaxy that had agreed to one note 10,000 years ago, and had never since been asked to consider any other. The humans came on, and the herald felt, very faintly, the first cold thread of curiosity becoming something colder. There was something the deaf ship was carrying. The herald could not hear it, which was itself remarkable, because the herald could hear everything. There was a silence inside the silence of the approaching ship, a held breath, a coiled and waiting quiet, and the herald, which had spent 10,000 years as the loudest thing in the galaxy, did not know what a held breath meant. Nothing had ever held its breath at the herald, and lived long enough to exhale. It reached back into its long memory, searching for any precedent, any single time a species had not merely resisted the song, but carried it. There was nothing. There had been the dozen dead spots, the runners, but they had only ever been deaf. Deaf was a closed door, a thing the herald understood, but this was a door that opened the other way, outward, toward the herald, and behind it was something holding the herald's own voice like a blade. The herald considered, for the length of a held note, simply withdrawing, lifting the cord from the planet, gathering the armada, leaving this one system to its strange deaf ship. 603 worlds were enough, but the thought died as quickly as it came, because the choir did not withdraw. To withdraw was to admit there was a note in the galaxy the song could not contain, and if there was one such note, then there might be others, and if there might be others, then the silence the choir had built across 10,000 years was not silence at all, but only a held breath, waiting. The herald could not allow the thought. So it did the only thing it had ever done. It sang louder. It increased the chord to a volume no species had ever endured awake. It poured the full art of 10,000 years down upon the small dark ship, the chord that had ended 90 worlds in the herald's own lifetime, the note that no living thing had ever stood inside and remained itself. It sang with absolute confidence, the weight of 100 centuries behind every frequency, and it told itself, in the wordless certainty that passed for thought among the choir, that confidence had always been enough, and would be enough again. And the small deaf ship flew into it, and did not slow. The first repeater ship to fall away gave the iron antiphon an opening she had not earned, and Cole knew at once that it was a trap. "They are parting for us," Vance said, watching the plot. Two of the pale forks had drifted aside, opening a clean lane straight toward the center. "Captain, they are letting us in." "Of course they are." Cole studied the lane. "They think the song is doing this. They think we are a moth drawn to the lamp. As far as they have ever seen, anything that comes toward them is already half theirs." She tapped the plot where the flagship sat. "Helm, take the lane, but not at full speed. If we look eager, we look conquered. If we look conquered, they stop watching us. And the one thing keeping us alive right now is that they think they understand what we are. We go in steady. We go in like we mean to arrive." They went in. The cord climbed. Aldous had warned them the volume would rise as they neared the source, but no warning could have prepared the crew for the way it changed in character. Through the hull, even at the cancellation field's full strength, the song was no longer a rumor through a wall. It was a presence in the room. Park's hand began, very slowly, to move in time with it on the edge of his console. He noticed it, made a small wounded sound, and clenched his fist until the knuckles whitened. "It is finding the edges of us," Aldous said quietly to Cole, watching gauges climb in the Mockingbird's housing. "Even through the hull, it is testing every seam. 22 minutes to full charge, Captain. We need to be in position when she fires, not before. If we arrive early, we will sit in the heart of the formation with an empty weapon, and they will have all the time in the world to crush us." A repeater ship slid past the viewport, close enough that Cole could see the resonant grooves cut along its hull, the channels that caught the conductor's note and carried it forward. She understood now, looking at it, why no fleet had ever defeated the choir. They had not built a fleet of warships. They had built a single instrument 240 pieces wide, and every piece existed only to make the conductor louder. Cut 1, and the song barely faltered. The instrument was the armada, and the armada was the instrument, which meant the armada could be played. "Doctor," Cole said slowly, "those grooves, they are not armor, and they are not engines. They are tuned. The whole hull is tuned to carry the conductor's note, which means they will carry our note too, if our note wears the conductor's shape." "Yes," Aldous said, "the same grooves that make them unbeatable, make them our amplifier. We do not have to be loud, we have to be right. They will be loud for us. We are flying through the largest broadcast instrument ever assembled, Captain. And if we can put one true note into its center, it will play that note to the whole galaxy whether it wants to or not." Cole used the minutes. She moved among her bridge crew, and at each station she stopped and put her hand on a shoulder and said one specific true thing, because she had learned that fear is general and courage is specific, and the song was general, and so the answer to the song had to be made of particulars. To the engineer, she said, "The seam you welded on Deck 4 is the only one that has not failed. Well done, Cobb." To the communications officer, she said, "You kept your head when the goodbye broadcasts came in. That took something." To the navigator, Merritt Sutter, she said, "You have flown this ship through worse," though it was not quite true, and Sutter knew it, and took the lie for the gift it was. "The song is general," she said aloud to all of them. "It only knows how to talk to everyone at once. It does not know your name. It does not know that Cobb welded Deck 4 or that Sutter's grandfather taught her the stars. It only knows the shape of fear, because fear is the same in everyone, and that is the only door it has. So be specific. Be exactly who you are, down to the smallest thing. The more specific you are, the smaller the door it has to fit through. That is the whole defense. Be too much yourself to be anyone the song can use." "Range to source, 4 minutes," Park reported. His voice shook. The song was getting into him. Cole could see it in all of them now, the small movements, the softening around the eyes, the dreadful peace creeping in at the corners. "Talk to me," she ordered. "All of you. Out loud. Tell me your names. Tell me where you were born. Keep your own voice in your own ears. The song wants you quiet so it can be the only thing you hear. So do not be quiet." "Lieutenant Daniel Park," Park said, gripping the words like a rail. "Born in Cardiff. My mother's name is Gwen. She used to wake me for school by opening the curtains. Not by singing. Never by singing. And that is how I am going to remember which voice is mine. Commander Iris Vance, born aboard the freighter Cassandra, between stars. I have never set foot on a planet in my life, and I am not about to start kneeling on someone else's. Dr. Emil Aldous, born in Lisbon. I have spent 40 years listening to this song, so that today I could ruin it, and I intend to enjoy ruining it." It went around the bridge. 11 names, 11 places, 11 voices laid down like sandbags against a rising tide. And it worked. A little. The hands stilled. The eyes sharpened. The human noise of 11 people insisting on themselves pushed back, just enough, against the one enormous note that wanted them all to be the same. A proximity alarm chimed, soft and almost polite, and Vance silenced it. "A repeater is dropping toward us from above," she said. "It is not firing. It is just descending into our path. I think it means to scrape us, Captain, to shear off the cancellation paneling along our spine with its own hull, and leave us open early." "Roll us," Cole said. "Show it the armored flank, not the baffles. Let it scrape ceramic, not the field." The iron antiphon rolled, slow and heavy, half her engines straining, and the pale hull came down across her back with a long shriek of metal on ceramic that ran the length of the ship like a finger drawn down a comb. Sparks fountained past the viewport. A meter of armor peeled away in a curling ribbon, but the cancellation paneling underneath held, and the repeater, having spent its momentum, drifted off above them, its grooves still singing, indifferent, already forgetting them, because to the choir, there was no such thing as an enemy, only a thing that had not yet knelt. "Armor breach on the dorsal spine, contained," Vance reported. "The field is intact. They are improvising, Captain. They have never had to do this before. They do not know how to fight a ship. They only know how to fold one." "Good," Cole said. "Then we are teaching them 2 new things today. The word no and the word fight. Keep going, steady to the throat." Then the herald changed the song. It came without warning, a shift in the chord so sudden that even through the cancellation field it struck the bridge like a physical blow. The golden patience vanished. In its place came something personal, something that reached past the general pressure and aimed. Cole staggered. For one instant she was not on the bridge. She was 8 years old, in a kitchen she had not thought about in 40 years, and her grandmother was there, and the kettle was on, and everything was warm and safe, and nothing was ever going to be frightening again if she would only sit down at the table and stay. She came back to herself with her cheek against the cold rail, and Vance's hand gripping her shoulder. "Captain, Captain, stay with me." "It is reading us," Aldous said, ashen, bent over the mockingbird, fighting it himself. "It found the seams I warned you about. It is not singing the conquest hymn now. It is singing each of us a private one. It is offering everyone the one thing they would kneel for." He looked up, and there were tears standing in his old eyes that he refused to let fall. "It is very, very good at this, Captain. 10,000 years good. I did not think it could narrow the song to a single mind. I thought the chord was a flood. I was wrong. It is a flood, and a key, and a hand that knows exactly where you are. Soft all at once." "How long to charge?" 9 minutes. "Range to source?" 2 minutes, 50 seconds, Park managed. He was weeping openly and steering with perfect precision, 2 things at once, the most human thing Cole had ever seen. "It is showing me my mother, Captain. She is at the curtains. She is telling me to come home. She has been dead for 6 years, and the song does not know that, or does not care. And either way, she is right there, and she is asking me to come home." "I know," Cole said. "Steer the ship, Daniel. Your mother opened the curtains. She did not sing. The thing wearing her face is singing. That is how you know it is not her. Steer the ship. Your mother would want you to steer the ship." Cole felt the song reaching for her own oldest wound, and she let it come, because the only way through a thing is through it. She had no dead child for the song to use, no single great loss it could press like a bruise. What she had was smaller and harder to reach. She had 11 years of being the one who decided, the one whose open hands and lowered shoulders told everyone else how afraid to be, and the loneliness of it, and the song found that. And it offered her the one thing it had never occurred to her to want, which was to not decide, to let go of the deciding, to let something older and surer carry the weight she had carried alone for so long. It was the most tailored lie of all, because it was not offering her rest from fear. It was offering her rest from command itself, from the thing that had defined her, and for one terrible moment, she understood exactly why 603 worlds had said yes. Then she thought of the off-key lullaby, the woman on the planet singing badly to a baby, deciding, alone, with no ship and no doctor, to sing back. And Cole thought, if she can carry it, I can carry it. And the moment passed, and her hands stayed open on the rail. The herald, in its chamber of glass, was no longer curious. It was working. It had thrown the full art of 10,000 years against the small deaf ship, and it could feel, finally, the crew beginning to soften, slowly, far more slowly than any crew it had ever sung to, but softening. The deaf ones were not deaf to grief. They were not deaf to longing, to the dead they had loved, to the simple animal wish to stop being afraid. The herald had learned, across 603 worlds, that you did not need to reach a mind through its ears if you could reach it through its wounds. Every mind was a house with 100 doors, and the ears were only the front door. The dead were a side door. The herald knew them all. On the planet, the change reached down before it reached the bridge. The herald, divided now between the song aimed at the deaf ship and the song holding 4 million people, let the second song slip by a fraction. And in the streets of the capital, for the space of a single breath, the chord wavered and the kneeling stirred. Della Ortiz, watching from her window, saw her smiling deputy frown for the first time in 18 hours, saw 1,000 bowed heads twitch as if waking from the same dream at the same instant. It lasted only a moment. The herald caught the slack and the heads bowed again, but Ortiz had seen it, the flicker, the crack in the perfect note, and she understood what it meant. Something up there was making the song work for its living. Something up there was forcing the loudest thing in the galaxy to choose where to point itself. She turned from the window and began, in a voice that did not shake, to give orders to a colony that might yet have a future. And then, the herald felt the held breath again, the coiled quiet inside the approaching ship, and this time it was closer, and this time, the herald could almost make out its shape, and the shape was wrong. It was the shape of the herald's own song. The deaf ship was carrying the hymn. For the first time in 10,000 years, the herald of the sixth silence experienced the sensation lesser species called fear. It did not have a word for it. It had only ever been the source of it. But it recognized, in the coiled quiet aimed at its own throat, that the small ship was not coming to die at the lamp. It was coming to put the lamp out. It was carrying the song, not a copy, not a recording. The song, alive, aimed, and somehow turned, somehow wrong, the way a face in a mirror is wrong even when it is perfect. The herald did something no herald had done in the recorded memory of the choir. It ordered the repeaters to close the lane. It ordered 239 ships to turn their resonant hulls inward and crush the intruder between walls of sound, to drown the coiled quiet before it could be loosed. In 10,000 years, the choir had never once needed to fight. The hymn had always been enough. The armada did not even carry many weapons, because weapons were for species that could be refused, and the choir had never been refused. So the herald reached for the only weapon it had, which was the armada itself, and ordered it to close like a fist. The lane began to close. "They are on to us," Vance said. "The formation is collapsing inward. They mean to box us in before we reach the source. Captain, those hulls are tuned, not armored, but there are 239 of them, and they are coming together fast. If they close around us, they will not need to fire. They will just press, and the song between them will be loud enough to shake us apart." Time to charge? Cole was on her feet again, blood on her cheek where the rail had caught her, her voice iron. 7 minutes, Aldous said. "Time until that lane crushes us?" Park looked at the plot, ran the closing rate against their speed, and his face went still. 4. Cole did the arithmetic everyone on the bridge had already done. The Mockingbird would not be ready in time. They would be inside the closing walls of the armada, with a weapon 3 minutes short of charged, 239 throats bearing down, and the conductor's personal song carving at every wound the crew had ever carried. She looked at the flagship, so close now it filled the viewport, glass and slow light, the heart of 10,000 years of conquest. "Doctor," she said, "can the Mockingbird fire at less than full charge?" Aldous went very still. "At 70% maybe. It would not reach all 240. But we do not need it to. We need it to reach the source. One throat. At 70% it might reach the source. Once. One shot. One inversion. No second chance. If it fails, the array burns out, and we are deaf again, with the windows open, and the whole armada inside our hull, and there will not be a third human ship to try this after us." "How long to 70%? 3 minutes, 40 seconds. And the lane closes in 4. Cole almost smiled. "Then we have 20 seconds to spare, and not one of you is going to waste them being afraid. Helm, full speed. Forget the baffles. Forget looking conquered. They already know what we are. Take us to the throat as fast as this ship will go. Doctor, you fire the instant we are in range, and charge to 70. Not a second before, and not a second after. We are not going to outbuild them, and we are not going to outshoot them." She set both hands on the rail, and looked at the cathedral of light bearing down, at the long pale shape, dimly visible at its heart, with its throat lifted in 10,000 years of song. "We are going to outsing them. Open the windows." The windows opened, and the song came in. There was no describing it for anyone who had not stood inside it. The cancellation field dropped to 40%, and the full hymn of the choir entered the iron antiphon at last, unfiltered, the loudest sound any human had ever survived. It was not heard. It was inhabited. Every crew member who had ever heard only the rumor through the wall now stood inside the room with the thing itself, and the thing itself was beautiful, and patient, and 10,000 years deep, and it wanted them, and it loved them, the way a tide loves the shore it is pulling under. On the bridge, 4 of the 11 dropped at once. They did not fall. They knelt. 3 technicians and 1 navigator simply lowered themselves to the deck with expressions of such relief that Cole felt her own heart lurch toward the floor with them. The song had found their wounds and filled them. They were home. They were carried. They were done being afraid. One of them, a technician named Eli Halsey, looked up at Cole with shining eyes and said, "It is all right now, Captain. You can stop. We can all stop. It says we never have to be afraid again." And the worst part was that he was not lying. The song was not a lie about how it would feel. It was only a lie about what it would cost. 7 on their feet, Vance said, and her own voice was strange, dragging, fighting the current. "Captain, I can feel it. It is in me. It is telling me the Cassandra is coming back. My family. The whole freighter. Everyone I grew up with. It says they are all aboard, and the airlock is open, and I only have to stop. Do not stop. I am not going to stop." Vance's hands were locked on the controls, white to the bone. "But I need you to know it is the hardest thing I have ever done, and I have done some hard things. I need someone to know, in case I do not get to say it after." "I know," Cole said. "I am here. I will remember. Now fly the ship." Aldous was at the Mockingbird, and he was screaming, not in pain but in effort, a wordless human roar thrown against the golden note, the sound of a 71-year-old man refusing with everything he had left. "Charge at 64%, he forced out. 66 range? Source in 40 seconds, Park said. He had stopped weeping. There was nothing left in him but the steering. "The lane closes in 50. They are going to have us before we have them, Captain. By 10 seconds. Unless we go faster, and we cannot go faster." The walls of pale hulls pressed in on every side now, so close the resonant grooves were visible as scrollwork, and the song pouring from them was a physical weight that made the deck plates ring. The iron antiphon shuddered as the cancellation baffles, half shut to let the Mockingbird sing, took the full pressure of 240 throats. Somewhere aft, a hull seam failed with a sound like a struck bell. Atmosphere whistled. Damage indicators bloomed red across the boards, a constellation of failures. "We are coming apart," Vance reported. "Hull integrity 60% and falling. The baffles cannot take this and broadcast at the same time. We were never meant to do both at once. We are tearing ourselves open to make room for the song to leave. They only have to take it for 40 more seconds." Cole crossed to the kneeling navigator, Merritt Sutter, knelt beside her, took her face in both hands. "Sutter, listen to me. You are not home. This is the song. Your home is behind you, and you are flying toward it, and you cannot get there on your knees. Get up, and help us teach them no." Sutter's eyes were far away, fixed on something warm and golden that was not in the room. But Cole held her face, and kept talking, and after a moment, something flickered behind the navigator's gaze, a small, fierce human spark, and Sutter said, in a cracked whisper, "Cardiff." "What?" Park said Cardiff. "His mother is Gwen." She opened the curtains. She did not sing. "I am supposed to remember the names." Sutter's hand found the deck. "I am supposed to remember the names." She pushed herself up. She was shaking and weeping and standing. "I am Merritt Sutter. I was born in Reykjavik. My grandfather taught me the stars. I am not kneeling on this deck." "No," Cole said. "You are not." It was Aldous who found the thread that pulled the rest of them through. Through the roar of the song and the roar of his own refusal, the old doctor began, of all things, to talk. Not to anyone in particular, he narrated. He named the gauges as they climbed. He named the frequencies as the song shifted, calling them out like a fisherman reading the weather. This is the third harmonic. This is the grief register. This is the one they used on the Scout. And the naming did something the names of people had not quite managed. It turned the song from a god into a machine. It is hard to kneel to a machine whose parts a tired old man is calling out one by one in a flat, tired voice. The crew heard him, and the song stopped being a presence and started being a problem, a thing with parts and seams and a structure, a thing that could be understood and therefore beaten. Cole would think, afterward, that this was the truest weapon they carried, not the Mockingbird. A human being so stubbornly curious that even drowning in the loudest song in the galaxy, he could not stop taking it apart to see how it worked. 2 more of the 4 found their feet, hauled up by the names, by the spark, by the simple, impossible human refusal to be carried under, by something that loved them. They did not rise because the song let them. They rose against it, the way a swimmer rises against the pull of deep water. And the rising was the whole point, the thing the choir had never seen in 10,000 years, because no one inside the song had ever been given a hand to climb out by. One of the four did not rise. Halsey stayed down, smiling, gone, his eyes fixed on a home that was not there, and Cole left him there because there was no time, and the leaving of him was a wound she would carry for the rest of her life. A new alarm cut across the bridge, sharper than the rest. Park read it, and his hands tightened. "Captain, the source ship is moving. The flagship is rotating its throat away from us. It knows what we are carrying now, and it is trying to put its own hull between the conductor and the Mockingbird. If it turns 30 more degrees, we lose the clean shot. The note will hit armor instead of the throat and scatter." "Helm, get us back on the throat," Cole snapped. "Whatever it costs." "We do not have the engines," Vance said. "3 are gone. I cannot chase a turning ship that size." Cole's eyes moved across the plot, fast, the way they had moved across 100 impossible boards in 11 years. The flagship was turning. They could not chase it. But the repeaters were still closing, the fist still tightening, and one of them was sweeping in low and close beneath the iron antiphon, almost near enough to touch. "Then we do not chase it," she said. "Helm, drop us. Down. Hard. Onto the back of that low repeater. Use its hull as a deck. Let it carry us across the gap and back into line with the throat. It is going where we need to go anyway." It was insane, and it was the only move, and Vance did it. The iron antiphon fell, scraping down onto the spine of the passing repeater, riding the enemy hull like a sled, and the repeater, built to carry the conductor's note and nothing else, did not know how to be ridden, and held its course, and bore the broken human ship across the closing gap and back into a clean line with the conductor's turning throat. "Source in 15 seconds, Park called. "We are back on it, riding the repeater right up its own line." "Charge?" Cole demanded. 69%, Aldous said through his teeth. "It will not reach 70. The array is fighting the song too. The song is bleeding into the charge cycle and dragging it down. We fire at 69, or we do not fire at all. There is no 70. 70 is gone. We fire at 69. Cole made herself say the rest, because the crew had earned the truth even now, especially now. "Doctor, you have the firing solution. You see the throat clear, you sing. You do not look to me for permission, because by then, I may not be able to give it. The song will be inside this bridge. I may be on the floor. Sing anyway. Sing if I am begging you not to. Sing if every voice on this bridge is begging you not to. Because if we are begging you not to, that is the song talking, and the song is exactly the thing you are firing at. Do you understand me, Emil?" "I understand you, Nadia," Aldous said, and it was the only time in the whole engagement that either of them used the other's first name, and they both knew why, and neither of them said it again. The flagship filled everything now, the cathedral of glass and slow light, and at its center, dimly visible through the resonant panes, was the long pale shape with its throat lifted, the herald itself, the conductor of 603 falls, singing the chord that had brought a galaxy to its knees. In its chamber, the herald saw the small deaf ship break through the last of the closing lane, hull venting atmosphere in long silver plumes, half its lights dead, 3 of its seams torn open, and still coming, still aimed at the conductor's throat, and the herald threw the entire weight of its 10,000-year voice at the intruder in one final overwhelming chord, the killing note, the note that had ended species, the note that no living thing had ever stood inside and remained itself. The iron antiphon stood inside it and remained itself. "Range," Park said. "Now, now, now." "Doctor," Cole said. "Sing." Aldous brought his hand down on the Mockingbird. The inversion fired. There was a moment, in the firing, that Aldous had warned her about, and that Cole would spend the rest of her life trying to describe. A half-second, after the Mockingbird sang, and before the herald heard, when the note hung in the void between the two ships, and was neither the choir's nor humanity's, when it was just a question with no answer yet, a held breath made of sound. In that half-second, the whole bridge felt it. The question, vast and old, and aimed at all of them at once. The question was the one the choir had been asking the galaxy for 10,000 years, the only question it knew how to ask. and it was simply this: "Will you kneel?" And in that half-second, the 7 who stood and the 3 who had risen answered it, not with words, because there was no time for words, but with the whole of who they were, with Cardiff and Reykjavik, and a freighter between the stars, and a welded seam on deck 4, and an off-key lullaby on a planet below, and a mother who opened the curtains instead of singing. They answered it the way humans always answer it, which is by being too specifically, stubbornly, particularly themselves to fit through the door the question opened. The answer was no. It had always been no. It had been no since the first line of the first order, and now, in the half-second the math could not account for, the no became a sound, and the sound was the inversion, fully alive. It was not loud. That was the thing none of them had expected. After all the volume, all the weight, all the golden tide, the inversion left the iron antiphon as something almost gentle, a single clean note, that was the choir's own hymn turned inside out, the same key given the opposite turn. Where the conductor sang kneel, the iron antiphon sang rise. Where the conductor sang belong to us, the small deaf ship sang they belong to you. Where the conductor sang there is only one voice, the iron antiphon sang there were always others, you simply drowned them. It was the war hymn, perfectly mirrored, every frequency the choir had spent 10,000 years perfecting, now bent back upon its maker. The inverted note crossed the small space between the human ship and the flagship's throat, and it struck the herald of the sixth silence, and the herald heard, for the first time in 10,000 years, its own song. It did not understand at first. The note was so familiar, so exactly its own, that the herald's vast mind reached for it the way it reached for any echo, to gather it back into the chord. But the note would not be gathered. It was the same key turned the other way, and as the herald reached for it, the inversion turned in the lock of the herald's own mind, the lock the choir had used to open every species in the galaxy, and it did to the herald what the herald had done to 603 worlds. It told the herald to kneel. And the herald, built across 10,000 years to broadcast a song no mind could refuse, had no defense against that song, because it had never imagined it would need one. It had never built itself deaf. Why would the loudest thing in the galaxy ever need to stop hearing? The choir had made itself the source of the song, and in doing so, had made itself the one species in creation with no protection from it. They were not deaf. They were the most listening thing that had ever lived. Every cell of them tuned to the chord, every part of them an open ear. And now they listened to their own hymn, inverted. And the hymn said the thing they had said to everyone, in the one voice they could never refuse, which was their own. The herald's throat closed mid-note. The chord faltered. For the first time in 10,000 years, the chord faltered, and across the armada 239 repeaters felt their conductor's note waver, and reached, as they were built to reach, to catch it and carry it on. They caught the inversion instead. The 239 repeaters, built to amplify whatever the conductor sang, caught the inverted note in their resonant grooves, and did exactly what they were built to do. They amplified it. They passed it down the line, hull to hull, groove to groove. They sang rise. They sang they belong to you. They sang the choir's own undoing in 239 throats, louder and louder, the greatest instrument ever assembled, now playing the one song it had been built to make impossible, broadcasting the inversion across the entire armada, and down, helplessly, perfectly, toward the planet. "It is taking," Aldous whispered. He was on his knees too now, but not from the song, from sheer exhaustion, his hand still pressed to the dying mockingbird, smoke curling up from its housing. "Captain, look at the plot. It is taking. They are doing it for us. They are singing it themselves." Cole looked. One by one, across the tactical plot, the 240 pale signatures of the choir's hulls were going dark, not destroyed, not burning, but silent, the golden hum that had defined them for 10,000 years, simply stopping, as the inversion turned in each of them in turn. The armada was not dying, it was being unmade. The song that was its soul was being sung back at it until there was nothing left to sing. The fist that had closed around the iron antiphon went slack, hull after hull drifting still, the great instrument falling out of tune one piece at a time, as the note it could not refuse moved through it. And on the surface of Halloran's Reach, in the streets of the capital, 4 million human beings who had been leaning toward a golden note for 18 hours suddenly stood in a silence so complete it rang. The kneeling rose. The smiling deputy in the governor's office blinked and frowned and asked where he was and why his knees hurt. The song was gone. For the first time in 18 hours, the people of Halloran's Reach heard only their own thoughts, and their own thoughts, freed, said the thing humans always say when the weight comes off. They said no, and then never again. And then, slowly, they began to weep, and to laugh, and to find each other in the streets. It was over in 90 seconds, exactly as Park had predicted. 90 seconds, after 10,000 years. But it was not free. The Mockingbird had fired at 69% through a hull-venting atmosphere, with the baffles half open, and the cost came due all at once. The inversion array, never tested at this power, never meant to fire while the ship was coming apart around it, gave out in a cascade that ran the length of the iron antiphon. Decks went dark. Conduits burst. The cancellation field, already at 40%, flickered and failed entirely, and for one suspended moment, the deafest ship in the galaxy was deaf no longer, fully exposed, with the dying echoes of 240 throats washing over her open hull. But there was nothing left in those throats to fear. The song was inverted. The last echoes that reached the iron antiphon were not kneel, they were rise. The choir's final broadcast, carried by its own repeaters, sung in its own perfect pitch, was the sound of 240 conquerors being told to stand down and let their captives go. It washed through the broken ship and harmed no one, because the only word left in it was the one word humanity had carried into the heart of the Armada and would not put down. The iron antiphon drifted, dark and broken and victorious, in the center of a silenced Armada, above a world that was waking up. The silence after the song was the loudest thing the crew had ever known. Captain Nadia Cole stood on a bridge lit only by emergency strips, the air thin and cold from the breached seams, and counted the people who were still standing. 7. Then she counted the people who were still alive. 10. The 4 who had knelt. 3 had risen with the names, and the 4th, the technician Eli Halsey, sat on the deck where the song had taken him, breathing, blinking, but empty in a way that had no medical word. He looked up at her with a stranger's eyes. "Where am I?" he asked. There was singing. It was so kind. He frowned, reaching for something that was no longer there. "I cannot find my name. I had a name. I am almost sure I had a name." Aldous, gray-faced and shaking, crawled to him and took his hand. "Your name is Eli Halsey," the old doctor said, though his eyes told Cole he did not know whether the name would ever land again. "You were born in Auckland. You will find it. Hold on to the sound of it. Eli Halsey, Eli Halsey." He said it over and over, the way you might warm a cold hand, while the man who had been Eli Halsey listened to his own name as if it were a song, in a language he had once known. Cole knelt beside him too, and she did not say anything false. "You sang the song that freed a planet," she told him. 4 million people are standing up right now because you stood here. You are coming home with us, and we are going to help you find your name again, for as long as it takes, however long that is. She did not know if it was true. She said it anyway, because that was what command was when the fighting stopped and the cost came due. The iron antiphon was dying around them. Vance read the damage report in a voice gone hoarse from fighting the song. The inversion array was slag. 3 of the 5 engines were gone. The hull had 11 open breaches, and the cancellation field, the thing that had defined the ship, the thing that had made her the one warship in the galaxy that could not be made to kneel, was burned out and would never sing again. She had been built deaf, and she had chosen, once, to hear, and the hearing had unmade her. Of the 112 crew aboard, 98 were alive. 11 would carry wounds that did not show, the ones who had heard the song too long and would wake from it for years. And one, Eli Halsey, had set his name down in the heart of the Armada and might never pick it up again. But she had not failed. She had not retreated. She had not lost. She floated dark and broken in the heart of a silenced Armada, and the Armada did not move against her, because there was nothing left in it that wanted anything at all. That was the part that haunted Cole in the hours that followed, as the survivors of the choir's fleet drifted in their resonant hulls, dark and quiet and lost. The inversion had not killed them, it had done something worse, something the choir had been doing to other species for 100 centuries, and had never once imagined could be done to itself. It had taken the song, and the choir, it turned out, had never been anything but the song. Strip it away, and what remained was 240 crews who did not know how to be without a cord to carry them, sitting in the dark of their own ships, as silent and emptied as the man on Cole's deck. They had unmade 603 worlds. Now they sat inside the unmaking, and they did not even have a word for what had been taken, because they had never imagined a galaxy in which they were the ones who could lose it. For a long while Cole simply stood on the dark bridge and looked at the silenced armada through the cracked viewport. 240 hulls, drifting, their golden hum gone, their lights dimming one by one. She had expected, if she lived to see this, to feel triumph. She did not. She felt the particular hollowness of a person who has won the thing she set out to win and finds it heavier than the fight. "Captain," Vance said quietly, coming to stand beside her. "We did it. Halloran's Reach is free. The colony is reporting full recovery. 4 million people, Captain. Alive in themselves. And it is because of this ship. Because of all of us," Cole said. "And it cost us Halsey, and most of Aldous, and 11 who will hear that song in their sleep for the rest of their lives, and we are floating in a tomb we made." She let out a long breath. "I am not sorry, Iris. Do not mistake me. I would do it again, exactly the same, 4 million times over. But I want us to remember, always, that we did not pay nothing. The histories are going to call this a clean victory, because the ship did not lose, and they are going to be wrong, and we are the only ones who will know how wrong. A victory that costs nothing, teaches you nothing. This one is going to teach us for the rest of our lives." In the cathedral of glass and slow light, the herald of the sixth silence still lived. Cole's sensors found it, a single faint heat shape at the center of the flagship, motionless. It had heard its own song. The lock had turned in its own mind. Whatever 10,000 years of conducting had built inside that long pale throat was gone now, inverted, knelt, and the herald sat in the ruin of its own voice, and did not sing. Cole did something then that no one expected, and that she could never fully explain afterward. She opened a channel to the flagship. She did not know if anything could still hear her. She spoke anyway, into the silence she had made. "This is Captain Nadia Cole, of the human warship Iron Antiphon. For 10,000 years you sang one note at the galaxy and called it a song. You never learned that a song needs more than one voice, or it is just an order with a tune. You ordered 4 million people to kneel by dawn. It is dawn now. Look at your planet. Look at what is not kneeling." She paused. "You were never strong. You were only the only one allowed to be loud. We were full of voices the whole time. You just never let any of us finish a sentence." There was no answer. She had not expected one, but she needed it said, on the record, in a human voice. So whatever the choir became after this would carry the memory of the day a deaf ship taught them their own song. Down on Halloran's Reach, the sun came up over the capital. Governor Della Ortiz walked out into the first light with her deputy beside her, the man rubbing his temples like someone waking from a long fever, and 4 million people stood in the streets and watched the dawn they had been ordered to kneel through. Nobody knelt. The order had come due, and the answer was the whole sky full of light, and not one human head bowed. Ortiz lived another 6 years, and she spent the first of them rebuilding the colony's silent weapon platforms, not because she believed the choir would return, but because she had learned, at 81, that the price of not kneeling is the willingness to stand up forever, and she meant to teach it to everyone who came after her. The woman who had sung the off-key lullaby into the goodbye broadcast was found. Her name was Tamsin Pell, a baker in the capital, 34 years old, with a daughter of 4 months named Bray. Park had logged the broadcast as Cole ordered, and when the records were assembled afterward, it became clear that Tamsin Pell had begun to sing back to the choir 19 minutes before the Iron Antiphon opened its windows. 19 minutes before the only warship in the galaxy answered the song, a baker with a tin ear had answered it first, with nothing but a lullaby and a refusal to let her daughter fall asleep to a stranger's command. The colony built no statue of the Iron Antiphon, By Cole's own request, when they asked her what to raise instead, she told them to raise a statue of a woman singing badly to a baby, and they did, in the square where the kneeling had been thickest, and the inscription beneath it said only, "She sang first." Cole visited it once, years later, and stood before it a long time, and did not speak, because everything she might have said was already carved into the stone. Before the relief fleet came, there was a long quiet stretch, 11 hours of it, when the iron antiphon drifted dark, and the 98 living aboard her had nothing left to do but wait and hold on to each other. Cole walked the ship in those hours, deck by ruined deck, by the light of a hand lamp, and she found her crew in twos and threes in the cold, and she did not give them speeches, because the time for speeches was over. She gave them their names. She knelt by a young engineer named Tobias Cobb who had not spoken since the firing, and she said, "Tobias Cobb," and he wept, and said it back. She found Merritt Sutter sitting with the man who had been Eli Halsey, holding his hand and quietly listing stars for him, the way her grandfather had once listed them for her, because she had learned in the heart of the Armada that you keep a person here by giving them things to hold, and a name is a thing to hold, and a star is a thing to hold, and so is a hand. She found Park last, alone at his dead station, and he looked up at her with his mother's curtain still somewhere behind his eyes, and he said, "She is gone again, Captain. The song took her away when it died. I had her back for 90 seconds, and then she was gone again." "I know," Cole said, "but you chose the ship over her, even with her right there. Do you understand what that means? You loved her enough to keep her a memory, instead of letting a weapon wear her face. That is not losing her, Daniel. That is the most you could have done for her. Gwen would be proud." Park nodded, and did not trust himself to speak, and Cole left him with his grief, which was his own, and human, and his. The relief fleet arrived 11 hours later, 14 human cruisers that had burned every reactor to reach the Reach in time, and had expected to find a graveyard. Instead they found a silenced armada, a planet free, and one broken ugly warship drifting dark in the center of it all, her crew of 112 reduced to 98 living, 11 who would carry the song in them for years, and one, Eli Halsey, who would spend 3 years relearning his own name before it finally, on a quiet afternoon in a garden, came back to him all at once and made him weep so hard that the nurse thought something had gone wrong, when in fact, for the first time in 3 years, something had gone right. There was one more thing, in those first hours, that the histories would record and that Cole herself would carry to the end of her days. As the relief fleet's medical teams moved through the silenced armada, cataloging the drifting hulls, they found that the choir had not all gone empty. A handful of the repeater crews, the ones farthest from the source, had caught only the edge of the inversion, and they had not been unmade so much as woken. For the first time in their lives, they were minds without a cord, and they were terrified, the way a person is terrified who has spent their whole life in a crowd and finds themselves suddenly, completely alone. One of them, through the slow patient work of a human translator over the following months, asked a question no member of the choir had ever been recorded asking before that day. It asked, "Who taught you the song?" And the translator, a young woman who had lost a brother to the choir at a colony called Aaron's World, thought about it for a long time, and then answered, "No one taught us. We learned it from you. You sang it to us for 10,000 years, and we listened, and we learned it better than you did, because we listened from the outside, and you never listened at all." The recording of that answer was played in human academies for a century afterward, because it said, better than any history, what had happened above Halloran's Reach. They could not save the iron antiphon. She was too far gone. They took off her crew and her dead, and the slagged remains of the Mockingbird, and Cole was the last to leave, walking the dark, cold corridors of the ship that had been built deaf so her people could stay human, and had chosen, once, to hear. She stood a long moment on the dead bridge, where the emergency strip still glowed faintly, and the plot was black. Then she said, to no one, to the ship, to the metal that had held when the math said it might not, "You did not fail, not once. Remember that, wherever ships go." And she left, and she did not look back, because she had learned long ago that looking back is a kind of kneeling too. Dr. Emil Aldous never fully came up from the Mockingbird's chamber. Not really. His body climbed the 3 decks, and he lived 2 more years. But the man who had spent 40 years listening to the song and then stood inside it at full strength had left something of himself down there in the cold and the dead sound foam. He grew quieter. He stopped going to the ceremonies. When humanity's leaders came to him, again and again, asking him to rebuild the inversion array, to make a fleet of mockingbirds, to give the species the weapon that had broken 100 centuries of conquest, he refused them every time, and his refusal grew gentler and more absolute each year. The last time they asked, a delegation of admirals stood in his small room and told him that humanity needed the weapon to stay safe, and the old man looked at them a long moment and said, "You are asking me to teach you to make other minds kneel, and to call it safety, and I have heard that song before. I have heard it for 40 years, and I will not be the one who teaches it to you." He died in his sleep 3 weeks later, an old man finally allowed to stop listening, and the schematics died with him, sealed by his hand and Cole's order, because the 2 people who understood best what the inversion was had agreed the galaxy was safer if it existed exactly once, in the past, in the wreck of a single ship, and never again. The choir did not attack again. There was no choir left to attack. The armada that had not surrendered was towed to a quiet orbit and studied for years, and the crews, slowly, some of them, began to come back to themselves, the way Eli Halsey came back, learning piece by piece how to be a mind without a cord to carry it. Some never did. The choir as an empire, the thing that had taken 603 worlds without firing a shot, simply ended, not with a battle, but with a single inverted note 90 seconds long, sung by a ship 3 minutes short, of charged with her hull coming apart, and her crew weeping at their stations, and refusing, all of them, to stop being who they were. Humanity did not become the new choir. That was the thing the histories made sure to record, and they had every reason to. They held the inversion now, the key that turned both ways, and a galaxy of species that had knelt for 10,000 years would have followed the people who broke the song anywhere, into any war, under any flag. But the inversion array died with the iron antiphon, and the schematics were sealed and never rebuilt. The deaf ship had sung once, to end a song that should never have been sung at all. That was enough. A weapon that turns conquerors to their own undoing is still a weapon that turns. Cole had stood inside the song. She knew exactly how kind it felt to make another mind kneel, and how easy it would be to call it mercy the second time, and the third. That was precisely why she would not build the thing that did it twice. Captain Nadia Cole was promoted, and decorated, and asked 1,000 times to describe the moment of victory, and she always disappointed the people who asked, because there had been no moment of victory, only a moment when 7 people held a bridge, and 3 more stood up from the floor when they should not have been able to, all of them carried not by a song, but by each other, by a list of names, by Cardiff and Reykjavik, and a freighter between the stars, and a mother who opened the curtains instead of singing. That was the whole of it. The choir had spent 10,000 years proving a galaxy could be ruled by one voice. 90 seconds had been enough to prove them wrong, and the proof was not a weapon. The proof was that the loudest thing in creation had never once heard the word no, and that the smallest deaf ship in the galaxy had been full of people who knew nothing else. Years later, when she was old, Cole was asked by a child what it had felt like to defeat a power that had stood for 100 centuries. She thought about it for a long time. Then she said the truest thing she knew. "We did not defeat them," she said. "We let them hear themselves. They had been singing the same order to everyone for 10,000 years, and they had never once stood where the order landed. The day they finally heard their own song, sung back to them straight, they could not bear it for 90 seconds. That is the whole secret, child. They were never strong. They were only loud. And the galaxy was only quiet, because no one had ever learned to sing back." The child asked what happened to the ship. "She is still out there," Cole said, "dark and cold and drifting, in the orbit where we left her. We could have scrapped her. We did not. We left her exactly where she sang, as a marker, so that anyone who comes that way will know what stood there." She smiled, and it was an old woman's smile, full of grief and iron in equal measure. The choir made the loudest empire in the history of the galaxy, and in the end, it was unmade by the one ship in 10,000 years that was built not to hear them, and chose, for 90 seconds, to listen. The Herald of the Sixth Silence lived another 41 years in that quiet orbit, sitting in the wreck of its own voice, and in all that time it never sang again. And it understood, at the very end, the one thing it had failed to understand in 100 centuries of conquest: that it had ordered 4 million strangers to kneel by dawn, and had spent 10,000 years building itself into the only creature, in all of creation, that could not survive being given, just once, the very same order it had given everyone else.